Hey everybody, what's up? It's Now Newbie back again with yet another video, and today I'm going to be talking about the FX show Adults. And look, I'm going to be honest, I did not enjoy the show. There were some funny moments, to be sure, but at the end of the day, it's a deeply unserious show about insufferable narcissists. I will say that the narcissists in this series are a lot more likable than some other narcissists that I've seen in other series. Now, to be fair, I haven't gotten to some great narcissistic media such as It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but in general, these narcissists aren't the most insufferable in the world, but they're still pretty bad. Like there's no getting around this. Some of them, I will say, are starting to show some signs of maturity by the end of the first season, but generally speaking, it's just not really enjoyable or relatable to observe. Some of the characters have some likable qualities, but they're quickly overshadowed by their selfishness and inability to hold themselves together without being the center of attention. It's pretty bad. There are even times when they hurt each other out of their own selfishness, which is really painful to watch because every time they do stuff like this, it's always played up for laughs when really it's not that funny. Now, not for nothing, there's some interesting concepts thrown in here that I think could have really worked with some more interesting, less narcissistic, and more diverse characters. I'm talking personality-wise. Just feels like half of the characters are just like the annoying gay character tropes. The other half of the characters are just sort of like entitled female millennial character tropes, and then there's like one or two characters who just seems to be just like a naive, somewhat immature, but relatively normal person, all things considered, individual trying to navigate their way through life. For a series about housemates, and there being 6 of them, to have only like 2 or 3 character types amongst them is just not really helpful. It sort of causes a lot of the characters to like blend together, if that makes sense. I will say that the episode's house rules in the male really felt like they ticked some very strong sitcom staple checkboxes, and they could really work as a yearly installment in a show like this. The concepts of those episodes centered around were quite strong, so I got to give them credit where credit is due there. Also, Paul Baker having a friend that he didn't know was famous was kind of hilarious and could have stuck the landing a bit more if they did a better job of establishing how out of touch he was with pop culture throughout the entirety of the entire season, rather than just basically causing it to be a gag in 1 or 2 episodes. Looking to more of the other characters here, I will say Issa and Anton being very lost and having existential musings about whether or not they're good people would have been fascinating to explore, but it's really something only mentioned in a couple episodes and not interacted with in a serious way at all. Samir having severe anxiety that makes him hallucinate was also a really nice touch, and one of the highlights of the show to me, especially because it's very consistent. You see it like every 2 or 3 episodes in the series, rather than something that's just brought up and then sort of dropped. But I will say that it's a bit unfortunate and kind of sad that nobody in his life tries to actually help him with his anxiety, right? When it comes to him in his relationships, the person that he's with doesn't try to help him with his anxiety in any serious way. His friends don't try to help him out with his anxiety, and he doesn't seem to try to seek out any real help on his own either, which makes the character come off as kind of stagnant. Like, I feel like in 45 years he's going to be the same sorry, anxious little man, and it's just not a pretty sight to see, and it's not funny, really. It's just kind of sad. Even Paul Baker, who comes off as one of the more likable characters, comes off as a bit bland and naive, although he is one of the more mature characters of the bunch and is arguably the most considerate of the group as well. Billy's the only character here who I feel like gets treated well with the show's writing, because you have a clear arc of her losing her job through her own incompetence, spoilers here, sorry, using a rebound to cope, and then afterwards becoming more mature as a result of those experiences, to the point where she ends up being like the most mature character of the group. Still, for the most part, this show feels like you're a fly on the wall of some incredibly childish grown-ups. As a matter of fact, calling the show Adults in and of itself is a bit of a punchline, just because of how much like children these characters behave. In one of the episodes actually kind of hinges on the fact that 2 of the main characters are more at home hanging out with children than with actual adults, which is kind of pathetic, and that's why it's not that funny. I feel like the show embraces that, but it's not really a fun or cool thing to embrace. Another major issue with the show is that it seeks to turn the main characters' flubs and failures into punchlines rather than treating them like the tragedies that they are. A great example of this is that a character doesn't know how to cook, but rather than that character learning how to cook over time and then humor coming from the trials and errors that comes with those sorts of efforts, or even apologizing for serving undercooked food to other people and preventing others from eating it because, it could make them sick or kill them or whatever. It's a moment that's used solely for laughs and shock value, and then everyone quickly moves on as if it doesn't really matter whether or not you actually know how to cook or you've poisoned your friends. I just was not a big fan of that. I'd be curious to see if the show gets renewed. I think it's an awful show, to be clear, but it does have a fan base online, and the actors here did do a great job, I will say. The casting was fantastic, the acting was superb. If there's anything to praise about this series, it's most certainly the jobs that the actors and actresses do, because they really brought their A game to this series. But on the other hand, other than seeking out others' thoughts on the show, I haven't heard a word about it beyond people complaining about how bad it looks, which relative to how heavily the show got promoted through digital advertising certainly can't be a good sign of its viewership. And you know what? I do want to talk a bit about this show's marketing for a minute, because one of the main reasons I watched this was because I was getting inundated with digital ads, digital placements. Every time I'd open up the Hulu app, it would show up, and I started to get the feeling that support for the show is somewhat astroturfed. It could be that people who wouldn't like this show got screened out by its awful trailer, so its audience is mostly like self-selected, which if so, is very fair. But the strange thing is, if you look up this show, you'll see a smattering of people online saying it's good, but not what they like about it, other than that it's funny and that it needed more episodes. Not anything about the characters or plots or gags that were funny. I will give the caveat of on YouTube, there are a handful of reviews, and about like a little bit less than half of them you will hear like legitimate praise of this series. Although even in some of those video reviews, the ones that aren't AI, let's throw those to the side, because half of the reviews for this series are AI, and I think that also is a bad sign. But even in some of the reviews made by actual humans, they were just like, oh, I like this, it's fun, it's edgy, the characters are really great, I just wish I had more episodes, bye. And that's like a 5-minute review that you'll see for this series, which to me it's just like, it's so weird, so strange. I don't want to accuse YouTubers of being paid to give positive reviews for adults, but it's just kind of a strange phenomenon to me. It's just like, you've watched the entire series, but you can't say much about it except that you liked it, and then you decide to make a whole video. It just feels strange. I feel gaslit in a way with what I'm seeing, because I find it kind of hard how anyone could watch the show all the way through, end up concluding that the show is good unless you're the type of person who just likes everything. And I feel like I would expect people to be a little bit more substantive with their praise of this series as well, rather than just being, yeah, it's good, I liked it, the acting, the characters are great. Especially in sort of like the formats where you would expect to see more detailed critiques or praise of a show, like on especially on Reddit and on YouTube. I just felt like discourse surrounding the series is pretty lacking for a show which, if you look at the IMDb rating, if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes rating, it's supposed to be a fantastic series. You've got headlines out there saying it's like, Friends but for Gen Z and stuff like that. But if you go beneath the surface, you're not seeing anything of substance in the online discourse, which is just kind of strange to me, kind of odd. I do wonder if they're astroturfing support for this series here, but at the end of the day, I'll never really know. It's not really that important. At the end of the day, the show is just bad, so I'm just gonna throw it out anyways. But I'm interested to see whether or not this show actually got enough viewership to get renewed, or if they're just making you think that it's popular through a lot of targeted ads and stuff. But anyways, that's all I got about this series. I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say about this series. If adults fans find this, I would love to hear your rebuttal to my critiques of this series, especially because I've seen reviews of people saying, oh, it's so relatable, and I'm like, what do you mean it's relatable? These are like horrible people who hurt other people so they can get more attention. How is that like relatable? Unless you're a narcissist, I don't know. But beyond that, that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in another video if you want to see another one of my videos.